Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spaced Out Radio, coming to you live from the mighty mitten known as Michigan and stretching to the breathtaking peaks of Colorado and rolling into the stunning Mount Hood National Forest. And last but certainly not least, we end out with the beautiful redwoods of Sequoia, California. Each week we bring a variety of subjects and guests to Spaced Out Radio, and tonight is going to be a good one for you guys. But don't forget to catch Dave Scott manning the helm Monday through Friday, except for today, but he will be back tomorrow, as well as Jessica Jones with her show Off the Trails. We also want to tell you our website, which is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including Rocking Out the Bumblefoot, Rate Up on SR Newswire, and so much more. We'd like to ask you to subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell. If you could do us a huge favor and share with a friend, we'd be incredibly grateful, as this helps Spaced Out Radio grow to bring you, our listeners, more content. Without you, SOR would not be possible, and we thank you for your support. Speaking of support, if you would like to help ensure the lights stay on for Spaced Out Radio, please know that our super chat is open in a fantastic way to support everything we do here at SOR. Don't forget to share with a friend, as this truly is the best way to support all that we do here at Spaced Out Radio. We also have a store filled with SOR swag merchandise for your browsing pleasure, which also supports SOR as a whole. You can pick up a Woo hoodie, t-shirt, tank top, and to support SOR at all times. We also have mugs, thermoses, and so much more at spacedoutradio.com. Don't forget to follow us on all our other media sites like TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. Links to all these can be found down in the show notes. Now, grab your favorite beverage and snuggle up to the fire. It is time to get this party started. Now, tonight, we have something gravy for you guys. But first, let's say hello to everybody in the chat. Roy the Boy 1988 gets gold position. Hello, Spaced Out Radio. Cosmic Fleur, you're in silver. Race Fan in bronze, and also the first wrench in as usual. Jeffrey Jerome, welcome to Spaced Out Radio chat. Good seeing you. Sandra, good seeing you as well. Michael Ledger, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Ann Palmer, good seeing you. All right, let's see who else we got here in the chats. Dennis Zuniga, welcome to SOR chat. Good seeing you in there as well. Kathy Evans, always nice to see you. Let's see, who else do we have here? John Hinojosa, Tavia's good vibes. And you always have good vibes, my friend. Welcome back. All right, let me get past all my stuff when saying hello to everybody in the chats. Trisha, good seeing you here. Let's see, Filthy. We got news for you. Filthy will be joining the show tonight. If anybody wants autographs from Filthy, text him on Messenger. He'll probably send you one. He's really good for that, and you never can read it. It's great. All right, who do we got now? Oh, it just went kapooey on me. All right, so let's see. D. Cohen, welcome back in. Rhonda Montpetit. There we go. Rock on. Joe Monk, always good seeing you. Worsley NGW, welcome, howdy, and good seeing you in the chat. Paranormal Pixie, I just saw you earlier. Welcome to the SOR chats. Love having you here. Margie O, nice to see you as well. And let's see, Brown Dwarf, man. Greetings, my friend. Greetings. How's that hunting in the woods going for you, my brother? Got to find them morels, man. I'll tell you what. Donna C, welcome. Let's see, who else do we got? Kevin Whipf, WIPF. Kevin Whipf. Always good to see you, man. Follow that yellow brick road. Evan Walters, welcome back. Downshift, always good to see you. Always good, man. Got to have that R35 TTR Skyline, just in case anybody's wondering what his picture is. Christine, always awesome to see you in the chats. Let's see, who else do we got here? Low Pro, not like GoPro, but it's Low Pro. Good seeing you. And just so you know that Dave will be coming back tomorrow. I am filling in for him tonight as I did on Friday. Let's see, who else do we got? Dim the Dim, welcome to the chat. Wham Bam Ham. Also, I just want to let everybody know that, you know, I'm going to get it to almost everybody if I can. Dell Elson, nice seeing you. Toe Tag, I love that. Toe Tag, welcome to the chats and SOR. Grandmaster UV, always good seeing you. Digger Dog as well. Aussie, always good seeing you. DC Joey, awesome, man. Welcome to the chat and SOR. Man, I really wish this thing would quit redoing itself on me. Dizzy Me, always nice seeing you here. Welcome back. Let's see, Justin AD Maynard, there it goes. Nice seeing you. Let's see, who else do we got here? All right. Oh, Phil Minervino, welcome back. And Enzo, gotta love Enzo, man. How's that shirt and hair going for you, brother? It's always good seeing you here, man. All right. So tonight's going to be crazy. Tonight's going to be awesome. We have a story for you. Amy WC, always good seeing you as well. Rodrigo's an experiencer from Texas. In late July of 2020, his life would change forever when, while spending the summer in rural New Jersey to sit out the pandemic, he had two back-to-back experiences in short succession involving both the phenomenon and what he believes to be the military or equivalent private corporate black project personnel equipment performing some of their joint exercises together. These two experiences kicked off a long series of encounters varying in intensity and scale over the next 3 months in over 26 states, from the East Coast to the West Coast to the Canadian-Mexican borders, multiple encounters per week, often daily. After he returned to Austin, Texas, the experiences continued but became markedly different. Swarms of silent drones flying in grid formations, mysterious planes and helicopters, as well as being tailed, monitored, watched by some organization for 3 to 4 months. In April of 21, he moved to Oklahoma City and the encounters continued. A traveling salesman at this time, sightings could be had on a regular basis all over the state, especially in rural eastern Oklahoma and, ironically, in his own backyard in the city. The encounters seemingly climaxed in late summer of 2021. Him and his girlfriend at the time were engaged by an orb and experienced 6 to 10 seconds of telepathic ability. This was immediately followed by what he can only assume was an implantation. Experiences abruptly stopped at that point, that is, until recently. As of Memorial Day weekend, sightings are back up, and on June 30th, 2022, Rodrigo witnessed what he can only describe as a light being. It was his first time seeing anything remotely like that, and again in his own backyard. This is what we're having here today, is an experiencer that you guys are going to enjoy. I love the guy. I've had plenty of conversations with him, even though I'm stinking busy all the time. But every time I've ever talked to him, I've enjoyed it. Welcome to the show, my man, Rodrigo. What's going on, brother?
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Grant. I really appreciate it. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. So we also got another thing for everybody else. We're going to have Filth back onto the show doing what he does best. His artwork is graced spacedoutradio.com. If you want to go see any of his artwork, there's there. He also has a book out on Amazon that you can buy as well. Welcome to the show, Filthy. There we go. Got that awesome thumbs up. So, Rodrigo, I know that I know your story. You know that I know your story, but they don't. I want to know the exact what happened in New York, over in Jersey. what got you there? I understand you were trying to get the, spend a little bit of time with the pandemic and go do what you're going to do. But tell us what happened, man.
Yeah, so I work in tech. I took a brief break to do some sales, but I'm back in tech now. Um, so when the pandemic hit, it inadvertently provided sort of an opportunity for me to not only live rent free, but kind of travel around while I worked remotely, which was great. It was as bad as the pandemic obviously was, and in many ways still is, and is still impacting us. Um, in my particular situation, it freed me up to travel across the country for a couple of months. Um, and the long and short of it was the first stop was I was going to spend that summer um, in summer of 2020 in New Jersey. Had some friends up there and spent the summer up there. And this was kind of towards the end of my stint. I was fixing to leave, as we say in Texas, fixing to. I was fixing to leave and head out on this road trip to head out to. I was going to just take the longest way I possibly could to get to Los Angeles and then ultimately back to Texas. And got up there. I decided to stay a little bit longer because my friends have some friends who have this hunting land that they've had in the family for ages. There's a dilapidated hunting blind that's on there, and that's basically it. There's some farmland that they rent out for wheat cultivation. There's a gigantic pond, and then everything else is pretty much woods and rolling hills. But there's this hunting blind and this gigantic wheat field, so we had, pretty good view of the sky. But anyway, I wanted to check that place out because they've got dirt bikes and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I was gonna extend my stay so that I could maybe partake in some ATVs and dirt bike action. Um, and so anywho, that's why I was still there in late June. Uh, I'm sorry, in late July. July 27th rolls around. We're all kind of hanging out on the back porch. My friends had a 14-acre horse ranch in rural New Jersey. It was gorgeous. It was a wonderful place to spend the summer. Um, they had a koi fish pond and all of this, you know, um, landscaping around the place. It's just a nice place to hang out. And
Yeah.
I'm a smoker, so I'm outside quite a bit. And so were they. So we were all just kind of hanging out, having drinks, as we would typically do on any night. Um, my girlfriend and I had just broken up, and so she was no longer there. I was real in my feels at the time, um, but just hanging out, and we're sitting up looking at the stars, which is not something atypical for us. And satellites are not something that we see often.
Hmm.
Um, and things start to get weird. This is probably around 11:30 or 11:45 at night. Um, and there just seems to be things, but you're looking at it and you're making excuses for what you're seeing, and it was still quite subtle, what was going on up there. And so 15-20 minutes of this goes by. It's a little bit after midnight at this point, and the first thing that we start to see are orbs moving in groups. And at this point, they more or less do look like satellites, but they're moving in formation. And they're quite high up at this point, and
Hmm.
they're dropping in elevation. Um, Not all of them, most of them, in fact, are not moving very fast. They're moving all in total coordination with one another, but rather slowly, just kind of at satellite speed, but coming down and moving into, a very specific position in the sky. Um, Along
So,
with this,
so they're
oh
dropping
yeah,
in altitude, is what you're saying.
yeah.
Okay.
So at first it starts out with, we think there's satellites, then we think there are a lot of satellites, and I've seen the Musk satellites. I know Starlink, and all that. This was nothing even remotely like that. But um, so you have all of these sort of slow moving, satellite looking things that are kind of getting lower and lower in elevation from really high up in the sky, presumably orbit or near orbit.
Yep.
But there are a handful that are doing funky stuff, and what they'll do, they're as they're descending and sort of collating themselves, organizing themselves in the way that they do. Certain ones would start to zip and zag, across the sky. Sometimes they would do so in pairs. Sometimes they wouldn't, shoot off at shooting star speed. Um, they would just kind of kick the afterburners on and just really be kind of hustling across the sky. Not, probably at fighter jet kind of speed at low altitude sort of things. Still rather impressive. Lots of 90-degree turns. But it's kind of at this point that we're like, what is, what's happening, and we're kind of having the first of many that night, just mind blowing moments in every sense of the word.
So how long did this last? How long did you get to see the lights this time, or did they get closer?
So this happened all night. Like
Oh, wow.
this was the last orb didn't leave until like 9:30, 9:45 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
Like it was broad daylight. It was the morning. I wasn't gonna leave until that orb left because I was completely enthralled by the situation.
Mhm.
Um, and I was really tempted to, well, we'll get to this, but there was very much a human component attached to what was going on in the sky as well. And the way that, by the way, I'm conflating I hope I'm not conflating the two instances here. Right now I'm talking about the first instance in Belvedere, New Jersey, um, on the farmland that I was staying most of the summer. And then, even crazier stuff happened just a couple of days after that. Um, but at this point, we know that we're looking at something inconceivable and uh, something that defied everything that we sort of commonly held as, possible, real, um, viable. So at this point, we've been watching Orbs for a while,
Mhm.
and my friends are excited, they're interested, but they're not like this hasn't completely shaken them to the core,
Right.
apparently, like it had me at this by this point. And I mean, they're freaking out, but they weren't freaking out enough not to stay out the rest of the night with me. So, probably around 12:45, 1 o'clock, maybe a little bit later, maybe closer to two. I don't know. This was a very long experience event type thing. But eventually they went back inside, and they went to bed. Um, and my phone was inside. I'm not super, like, I don't, unless I'm having some kind of life changing event, I'm going on a road trip or going on vacation. I don't really post to social media. I'm not, I considered myself on a pseudo vacation at this point. I'm in Jersey. I don't really have friends up there necessarily, except the ones I was hanging out with. So me not being by my phone is not that unusual. And it's certainly
Right.
not back then. But the phone was in the house, and you could not have dragged me from the event to go get my phone to film it. Um, what I was seeing was completely life altering, honestly, and completely engaging, at least for me. So the orbs continue. They start to get, and yes, you, to answer your earlier question, they did get closer and closer down into the sky until they were low cloud level, is what I would say. So,
So a few hundred
you
feet
know,
off the ground, a
yeah,
1,000 feet maybe.
500 to 1,000 feet.
Gotcha.
And so they're all at the same altitude at this point, most of them. And they've positioned themselves in a grid, in as far as I can see. And I'm, walking around the field. I'm trying to, make sure I can kind of get a glimpse above as many of the tree lines as I can get. And um, on this farm there is an opening, but it's pretty much in the woods.
Yeah.
So there's a ring of tree line that kind of blocks, a lot of the ultimate sky out. But I had a pretty gigantic view right above my head. So from what I could see, the orbs were positioning themselves into a grid sort of formation. Here's what was here's what was bizarre. So they would stay there sort of stationary, not sort of completely stationary once they were in position, and they stayed that way for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And then out of what it seemed to come out of a single point in the sky, but it was like this, I don't know what else to call it other than this mist or this cloud. By the way, this was otherwise a totally clear night. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Um, I don't remember what the moon situation was on that night in particular, but I don't remember it being in the way or, providing too much light pollution or anything like that. Dark night, clear sky. This mist starts billowing out at the level that the orbs are at.
Gotcha.
And within 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds, the entire sky is completely clouded over. And what happened immediately after that was really interesting. There isn't a lot of air activity. I don't think we're under any flight paths in that particular section. I sat there all summer and I'm sure there were planes up in the air, but it wasn't something that I noticed that frequently. Conversely, I live in a flight path now and I'm very aware of everything flying by in my backyard.
Yep.
But as soon as the sky was totally clouded over, by the way, when I saw this, it was so arresting. It was so, it was just awesome in the literal sense of the word. It was just that I made a completely involuntary sound that I can only describe as like my way low down inner primate just took the keys to the car for a second. And it was a totally involuntary, non-conscious like yell that just sounded like a chimpanzee kind of sound. I'd never that was it. Kind of that in itself kind of freaked me out because I knew in that moment I'd never been more shocked about witnessing anything in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So this crazy, weird, amorphous cloud covers the sky. Just a few moments later, I hear all of this activity happening right above where I can't see. So helicopters, planes, a bunch of like human activity type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
That lasted for probably only 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so. And then as quickly as the cloud like materialized, it dematerialized. And it was like there was a giant vacuum cleaner up in the sky sucking up that like liquid nitrogen smoke that seems to have some kind of like power under its movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you think it's some sort of like cloaking that they're doing, or were they outside of this and maybe some type of ship was in the middle of it just coming into, our dimension?
At this point on the first night, I was I was really confused, and I wondered if maybe I wasn't watching some kind of hyper advanced holographic technology.
Gotcha.
You know, maybe these orbs are sophisticated drones, and between the coordinate points that they've aligned themselves up, they can create a moving image in the sky that can obscure whatever's, I don't know. That's what I initially thought. Um, However, the second night was the mist showed up again in two different ways, or in two different use cases. Um, and So I don't really know what to make of it. I've heard some interesting ideas on what that whole mist thing could be. Everything from chemical reactions from the transition from one place to another, from either another dimension or a wormhole or something like that. I've heard that these craft coming out are kind of dripping with mist. But anyway, the so the sky sucks itself back in. It's back to a clear sky, and this particular night kind of climaxed when I saw a really sophisticated jet, and what was like a military jet. I mean, it couldn't have been anything else. Um, I wasn't in the rabbit hole at the time when all of this happened, so my initial thought was, "That's a B-2 bomber. What is it doing over this farm?" But now I think maybe it's the TR-3B thing, kind of,
The
because
triangles.
the triangle, because it was triangular,
Mhm.
but it wasn't the football field size one. It was probably about the size of a B-2 bomber, if I had to guess, a large jet, but totally triangular in nature. And I had seen it flying in the sky, but like way, way up there, and it was totally black, and you really could only see its its implication, like its influence covering the stars as it went by. That was kind of how you could sort of track it across the sky and could vaguely make out it was a triangular shape, but there wasn't any light really associated with it. But the night was clear enough that even as high as it was, I could still see it. Anyway, that thing disappears. Then out of nowhere, it's 5 to 800 feet above my head, seemingly coming in for a landing just on the other side of the trees. I mean, there was no way, based on what I could see, and then not seeing it fly back up anywhere in any other direction. It was coming in for a landing. Couldn't have been more than a mile, maybe two, away from specifically where I was sitting. And I went on Google Earth and looked up the farm, and I'm like, there's nowhere you would land a plane nearby. There's some fields and stuff,
Mhm.
but that would be about it. So the sun starts to come up. Um, the mist has come out a couple of times at this point, and so it didn't do it just once. It would do it. It would suck itself back in. That process would take 20 to 30 minutes all in, and then it would do it again in another hour and a half, 2 hours. All the while, the drones that had been collated and organized were sitting there doing nothing, and then other little things would be zipping around, other little orbs kind of miscellaneously. But it was clear that there was this massive operation going on in the sky. This wasn't just an orb or two orbs. I mean, this was planes and jets and enough orbs to totally grid the sky and cover it up and do some kind of something. So sun comes up, the clouds suck themselves back in for the last time. It was amazing to watch at dawn, because the lighting was much better. But it really does look like the oozy characteristic of liquid nitrogen.
Mhm.
If you were to, like, it had energy behind it as it kind of undulated. So um, at that point, all of the orbs, except for one, started to retreat back into the sky. And like this is all happening at maybe well, right at around dawn, all the way through 7:30 in the morning. Um, the orbs kind of slowly started retreating, all except one, and this one was the one that was lowest in the sky, right in between a tree, right in between the tree line. And it wasn't until like 9:30, 9:45 in the morning um, that it started to finally retreat itself.
Gotcha.
And that whole morning, where this farm is, you wouldn't be on this road unless you were one of the 4 or 5 people that had land on this particular farm dirt road. It's in between two towns, and you would never, if you were going to either town, you wouldn't take that throughway to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But for, a good hour the whole next morning, it was just gigantic Humvee after, just big trucks just barreling down at speed in large caravan type groups. I mean, it'd be one right after the other, after the other, after the other. But I refused to leave the spot that I was sitting in until there was no more stuff happening in the sky. And, we were off the road quite a bit, but we could hear what was happening on the road. And I've never, not before nor since, after having been there all summer, heard any kind of vehicular activity that way. So that was night one. That was the first night that I ever saw anything like wild and crazy, and it was pretty wild and crazy. But it I don't know what they were doing, but it was very programmatic. That very coordinated, very organized, very programmatic, and seemed to involve both parties. Both ourselves. Special access projects or what have you, or military or whatever, and then these things.
So now, real quick question: when you were sitting there watching all these orbs flying around the sky, doing their grid pattern and everything else, I mean, you obviously live next to places where there's high traffic, flight traffic. I live next to a base as we speak right now, and I watch F-18s, mainly F-15s, stuff like that. And I mean, we have some. Every now and then we have some really cool planes come in. We had a few warthogs here the other day, the A-10s. We've had,
Those are
we
awesome.
had oh man, that's my actual favorite aircraft, hands down.
Can't argue with that, man.
Yep. And they've had the B-17 here, that's privately owned. And you could actually ride in that for $450. Not bad.
That's not
the
bad.
P-51.
That's really not bad.
The P-51D Mustang was $2,000. I was like, no, I'm good, dude.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's probably mine, or like one of the Rolls Royce Phantom type planes from back in the day. Anyway,
well, the reason why I'm saying that is because the sound, the noise that our
I had been there for a while, and I have lived under. I live next to a base now. We've got several bases here in Oklahoma. I've seen strato fortresses, which are insane to see in the air. It's too big. It's too big, man.
And they fly way too slow.
Yeah, it looks like.
I mean, in that deep noise they make, man.
Yeah. I don't remember if it was yesterday or day before yesterday, but a Chinook flew right over the backyard, like right over it. Couldn't have been more than 300 feet up in the air.
Oh yeah, I've seen those a few times. The one I don't like. Apologize. I'm just 1 second. The one I don't like listening to is the F-22, and the only reason is because they're insanely loud.
They're so loud.
Why?
It. You know when it's done. Yeah.
Yep.
And they're so little. You're trying to find them in the sky, and it takes you a while. And the noise is everywhere, but it's just like a little mosquito, in the distance. But yeah, there is. So what I'll say about this whole thing, and I've seen it a lot, is there's a gigantic gray area, and so there's two sides on either side of that gray area. There's the stuff that you can easily identify, that's airplanes, helicopters, even if they're far away, oh, that's a blinky plane or whatever, or oh, that's a satellite. You've got this gigantic gray area where you can't really make out what it is, and maybe it's weird, um, and there is some of that. There's plenty of that peppered into these 8-12 hour long nights. But then there's the things that are completely irrefutable. You're like, for instance, on that first night, we sat there for 20 to 30 minutes, kind of trying to continuously talk ourselves into that they were satellites, maybe interesting satellites, maybe drones of some kind or something. But then you saw something crazy,
Yep.
and you're just like, well, that wasn't any of the things on and nor was it gray. There was not much room for interpretation. That was something outside those other two boxes. And when those happen to you, there's no doubt, there's no question about it. You're just like, yeah, that was weird, and that happened. And
So
yeah.
DC Joey asks, ask him if he felt like ask him if he felt like they knew he was watching them. Do you think they were giving you a show just because of that?
Yes, but no. Like on the second night, it was really dang obvious that that's what was going on.
Gotcha.
The first night, and part of it was due to my limited scope on the first night with the tree line. I could tell I was catching something crazy, but I didn't know if I was catching it by accident, or if I was catching the I was thinking, so many things were rushing through my head watching all of this, but I wondered how far beyond, I'm like, is this happening everywhere? Is this happening on the East Coast? Is this happening in Jersey? Is this happening over the city? Or is this just happening over the backyard? So I kind of took the more conservative stances at that point, that I just caught something.
Yep.
But then 3 days later, 6 hours north in a different state on another much more rural patch of land with a gigantic visibility space. We'll get into New York next, I guess.
Yeah, let's hear the next one, because really, I mean, this story
that one was it goes deep.
yeah.
Long, lengthy. So what I did want to say about the jet that I saw, that little triangle, was that the only reason that it was so unbelievably close to me before I had any idea that it was there. Like, I saw it because it turned on its turbines and turned on its lights and seemingly its landing gear, and it was getting ready to land. But before that, I had no idea that was anything anywhere remotely near me. And when the engines did turn on, they didn't sound like regular jets. Even I compare it to a commercial airline. If a commercial airliner sounds like a Camry or a Corolla, this thing sounded like a Lamborghini, and F-18 sound like a Mustang or something,
Okay.
So it sounded exotic.
It sounds like the F-22 on steroids then.
Well, it wasn't loud. It sounded like you're a car guy.
Mm-hmm.
I would the interesting like harmonic that you get out of a V10, or even like maybe a V12, but like more the V10 than any.
You're also talking the difference between cross plane and a flat plane.
Well, V10s, yes. So not a cross plane crank, a flat plane crank, but a V10 specifically.
Gotcha.
Has a super exotic kind of multi-harmony sound. There's multiple notes coming out that create this sort of musical. Anyway, it was dope. That plane was dope.
I love the fact that you just said the sound that a car makes was musical. Me and you can definitely 100% be friends now.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, so it was whatever it was, it just, and that's why I went straight to B2. I'm like, man, is this the secret, the next whatever, and if so, why is it above rural New Jersey anyway? I mean, I know that that whole area is littered with, bases and,
You know.
so it didn't, again, that first night, I really felt like I just sort of lucked out. I
Mhm.
didn't necessarily feel, except for that one orb. That was the kind of like well, is it? Like, because I gotta say, I don't know what was going on up there, but it looked expensive, and nobody's ever spent that kind of money on me. So it's hard for it's hard for me to justify being in any way like re, reason or correlated to that first instance, and then all of that went out the window the second instance. So a couple of days rolls by. In those couple of days, maybe it was paranoia, but there was all kinds of weird stuff going on outside, specifically at night in the days after that first instance.
Mhm.
I felt like I was completely surrounded by something, and I had been there all summer. I had encountered black bears. I'd encountered, deer and rabbits and lots of raccoons that are down to fight, and like it's wild out there. It's not like Southwest America wild, but it's wild out there. And I'd seen all that. I'd been there long enough to see all of that. I was wearing my brown sweatpants every night in the days after that. There was weird, what I can only describe as blue fireflies
Mm.
everywhere amongst the normal fireflies. There was all kinds of foot traffic in the surrounding woods. The next door neighbor works for Homeland Security in a pretty high level role. Never met him. I just knew that through the friends that I was staying with. Not sure if that has anything to do with it. But that's what happened the first night. And like I said, it was real weird, creepy lights. Um, Felt like I was under heavy surveillance those first couple of days. And then we decided to head to New York so I could just see the property in the event that I was going to take off before we could get there with the dirt bikes and all of that. You got to check it out anyway, even if you're not going to get to do the fun stuff. And I was like, sure. And also, let's camp so we can see if we can see more UFOs. So change of audience. The I'm with one of the people that I was with the first night, but with another person as well that came in from San Francisco,
Mhm.
um, was visiting home for the summer, and we all went out and drove. It was about a 6 hour drive. It wasn't in Richfield. It was literally in the middle of nowhere, but that's the closest kind of. I Googled Earth it because I really didn't know genuinely where we were. Um, there was no there was no there was no way for us to get there. We lost signal. Um, we had to basically get there from my friend's memory, and it took like 2 hours of driving around the farmland and trying to drive into drives before we found the right place. So guessing where I was exactly, I would have to talk to the friends of the friends, so I'm not really connected to. But anyway, so we get to New York. On the way up there, I ask my friend to look up the weather. She does. She says there's no chance of rain, which was Gucci. We wanted to be outside, and she says, but there's a pretty strong chance of lightning. And I was like, what? And
Oh,
so
interesting.
I took her phone. I was like, I had never seen that before, at least not that I could recall. But yeah, clear skies, no clouds, zero precipitation, strong chance of lightning.
That is so
Okay,
odd.
it's
I
so
mean,
odd.
I understand how the cold and warm fronts work against each other, and I understand, I do understand that, but to have lightning with no clouds that's just bonkers. Keep going. I love this. I love this
Yeah.
story.
So, again, I Googled it. It turns out it is a thing. It doesn't happen often, but it is a thing.
Really.
So, yeah. Um, I don't remember why it was a thing. I remember being like, that's weird, Google it, and then being like, oh, I guess it's a thing. But yeah, because again, at this point, I'm kind of, I don't want to say paranoid, but uh, a rather excited state. Every like I'm buzzing, with questions, with just the fact that I've lived a lot of my life not really believing or I just lost the idea of like magic in the world at this point in my life. And so to kind of have all of that just tipped on its head was pretty wild. We get to New York. This place is out in the middle of nowhere. I'm gonna. I'm not as good as Filth, but in the couple of minutes leading up to going live, I drew something that I'm not sure if it's gonna. I'm not sure if it's gonna cross over. Um, how do I do this? Wait. Well, I'm not. Wow.
Everything's
This is
backwards, my man.
so.
Everything is
Yeah, everything's
backwards.
backwards. Okay. Well, dang it. Maybe I'll just use this. So, pretend this sticker is so in the camera. This is it's oriented backwards for me. I will demonstrate it accurately for you guys. So imagine this notebook is way bigger than it is, and that this is the road that we use to get to the hunting blind, and then there's a little just a horseshoe dirt drive to get in and out. And then all along, this is tree line, little tiny, like practically single track, barely a double track dirt road. Um, Tree line farm on the other side, tree line wheat field, um, and then tree line up here. And then here the woods and the hills start. And then here there's a gigantic pond. And the area of, you know, this is where the hunting blind is and the horseshoe is, but it would be way smaller in reality.
Of
We're
course.
talking, a little tiny section of this gigantic, several acre patch of land, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, because where everything ends up happening is kind of interesting. So night falls, um, and we're just hanging out. We've mostly been talking about the experience that we had a few days earlier to this new person, and we're telling her all about it.
Mhm.
And she's not that about it. She's just like, yeah, must have been crazy.
Like,
So
why am I in the car with these guys?
yeah, yeah. Um, so, but she was cool, and they were getting to see each other for the first time in a long time, so they were having a good time. But we were both excited about what happened, and the one disconnect thing was I kind of lost the people that I had been with that had gone inside with the whole cloud thing. I was like, and then these clouds came out and they were all moving, and and they were like, whoa, weird. I can't really imagine what you're telling me,
Yeah.
but that sounds crazy. And I know there was stuff going on, so I'll take your word for it. But they kind of left it at that.
Mm.
Anyway, all of that's just kind of setting up the night. So night falls, uh, we start to see stuff again. Um, and we start to see the exact same practically program of events that happened a few nights earlier, 6 hours away in another state. Except this time we have a much bigger vantage point as to what's going on. And so these orbs aren't just coming down from the top. They're coming from away, like from far away. They're coming, so from all directions. It's like they're kind of just sitting down on us over this big swath of land. Um, as that's happening, bringing back my handy dandy field graph along this tree line. So we're situated, well, everything's really here, the hunting blind and all of that. And so we're kind of looking out, this is our purview. We can't really see what's on the other side of the tree line. We can see all the way to this tree line and then all of the sky above it. Well, on the other side of this tree line, I didn't physically lay eyes on it because I was really rather fearful tonight. Like the first night it was pure intrigue and pure awe, and there was a lot of that on the second night too, but there was also a lot more room for contemplation the second night, especially when I realized that they were going through the same motions that they had a few days ago, to the extent where I could be like, hey, new person, they just did that. They're about to go on to this thing, that happened. And then it would, in pretty short order. Like they were, it was the same bullet point per bullet point activity list.
Really?
Yeah, like with rather little variation. And the variation that there was, I attribute it to the expanded field view. In other words, if I had been in Jersey and been able to see as much as I had in New York, I'm sure that it was probably a nearly identical situation going on. So on the other side of that tree line, there's some kind of mobile tent, mobile base, sort of. They have a word, a name for them, but I forget what it is. But, like a pitch up tent, when operations are on the go and they're not at a permanent installation of some kind, a temporary
like
installation.
Little pop tent or something, or what do they call those? Oh, not a hut. Is it like you're talking about one of the round ones? I forgot. Like I can't remember what those are called.
That's what I was picturing on the other side of, yeah. And on the other side of this tree line, you can hear trucks. You can almost hear voices. Like you can't make out what anybody is saying, but you can tell that there's people on the other side of those trees. They're working. They're moving stuff around. Helicopters and stuff start coming up like above the tree line to like leave and go do something. Yeah, like straight up personnel, like military type helicopters. I'm not a military aviation expert by any stretch, but like they weren't like there's a black police helicopter that flies around above my neighborhood all the time, and it's wasn't that kind of helicopter, some kind of Black Hawk looking thing. I can't remember if there was only one or two of them, but one of those just flew up out of the tree line, left.
And none of these helicopters that you're witnessing fly across this tree line are interacting with any of these orbs.
Not directly. Like they weren't chasing them. They weren't engaging them. They seemed to both be busy with stuff. They both had things to do.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, I was like, is this some kind of training exercise where, we've retrofitted some of their capability onto structural craft that we've made that we can, implement on, and we're learning how to control these things, how to drive these things, those are the kinds of things that were running through my head at the time. Then at one point, again, I'll bring back so the tent's over here, kind of really about halfway between the woods, the road, and the tree line, about halfway up. The glow is coming out pretty centered. On the other side of the tree line, right around here, but not more than probably 400 yards, 500 yards from the tent or whatever it was with the people, there was an orb that came up and then parked itself right down here,
Mm-hmm.
Adjacent to the tent.
The yurt
So
and all
like
that. Yep.
yeah, so they're both the same far away from me, but like the tent's basically right in front of us on the other side of the tree line, and then the orb that came up over went on the other side of the tree line that was on our right, and was probably, oh shoot, over here somewhere. Gosh, it's all so backwards as I'm like looking at it. I'm like, is this making sense? They were,
So if you just don't look at the screen and do it, then it translates pretty easily at that point.
Okay, good. So yeah, we're kind of viewing everything this way. The base is here. There's an orb that's flown at the same, latitude as the base, but it's kind of over here. And what proceeds to happen then was really interesting. A bunch of lightning started to happen, um, right underneath the orb that was over the thing. So there's an orb here that looks like it's just collecting lightning, and this lightning was wild. Like it very active, lots of stuff coming out in rapid succession, and big, thick, violet-looking lightning. Not the
Oh, like a
it
Tesla
had a
coil style.
yeah, like
Gotcha.
it yeah. That was one of the distinctions that I was like, maybe I'm just not generally that close to lightning, but that one had a distinctly like violet hue to it for whatever reason. But it was clear that it was coming up from the ground, and the orb was right over it. And this occurred for about 10 minutes. At some point, while this was occurring, I think one of the helicopters took off. So they didn't seem to care that that was going on, probably just 400 yards off to the side of them. And then it stops. And then that orbs goes off and does something. Um, then the orbs start to kind of close in a bit more, and then they start to they start to like dance in the sky, and they start to get really close, like they're on top of us, and they're doing these beautiful, like in pairs, wispy like designs across the sky, and it was like a dance. It was beautiful to watch, and it was,
Mhm.
every time one of them would light up and whir, or whiz by, or whoosh, or I guess like a hiss kind of sound. It sounds, not like the sound effect you might hear in a Doctor Strange movie, with an energy ball or something. Like, it just was so cool and beautiful. um and then the first cloud situation happened. And this was validating for me, because I could tell I really lost my initial audience when I was telling them about the cloud thing, and I was just looking at it, and then I hear her. They're like, "Oh, this is what you meant." They're like, "I struggled so hard trying to visualize what you were talking about with the stinking clouds," and yeah, they got to see it too. And it's so, because again, within a matter of we had a lot more sky. Maybe 45 seconds, the whole sky is blacked out, and then you hear all this activity happening above the sky. And now I'm seeing it in two places. Now the thoughts of, is this happening everywhere? Is this happening, or somebody
Mhm.
building some kind of Faraday cage around the whole planet? Is this, am I, is Independence Day about to happen right here, right now, in front of my face? And at this point, the fear starts to kick in, because I'm like, you know, what is going on? Why is this happening? Why is this happening right above my head? What am I
So
supposed to do with this? Yeah.
so hold that thought just for a minute. We are at the top of the hour. Everybody in the chats here, we have a whole bunch of new people, and there's no way I'm going to get to all of you. I see, let's see. Oh man, King of, I can't pronounce. I'm horrible at certain words, but Hueco Mundo, welcome to the chats. Invisible Tracker, welcome. Gordium85, good to seeing everybody here. I didn't get a chance to say hi to Nicholas, but Nicholas, it's good seeing you, my man. I'll have you jump in after the show so I can talk to you for a minute. And let's see who else we got here. Joe Monk, he's been here for a while. Raz, welcome. Well, see it every time. Duke at World Bigfoot Radio, my man. Good to see you in the chats. Always a pleasure having you here. And that's about it for the moment. So, because we're at the top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and take a short break. Anybody else want to go fill up their cups on whatever you're drinking? And we're going to throw Filthy on the main screen and let him just, you guys, ask him whatever you want. He's probably not going to see all the questions, but let's distract him as much as possible and see if he's really that good of an artist. I'm just teasing. He is a great artist. Anyways, we will be back in just a moment. Filth, the show is yours.
Oh, I'll turn off my terrible music so nobody has to listen to that. Nicholas Shaughnessy, who spells his first name correctly. Hi, Bob Birkins. Look at my hands. Ooh. Bob Birkins is the type of guy that would probably cut my hands off and put them over the mantle of his fireplace. So anyways, this is the Casablanca entities. I was going to do 3 drawings and I realized Hood's breath. There's no way I'm doing 3 drawings in one night from ink to, or from pencil to ink to, oh, good gods. Whatever. I'm fairly certain you guys understand what I'm putting down and whatnot and so forth, but yes, this is a weird encounter. I can't tell you about it because, well, I'm not done it yet. But I gave the name away, so. Apparently there were multiple creatures and they had 4 diamonds where their nose was supposed to be. Some kids see them. One of them had like a stumpy little leg and they were floating. Were they ghosts? Were they aliens? They came out of a ship. So I just draw the cartoons. I find stuff and draw the cartoons. So how's everybody's night? Oh, I don't know about that. Cats getting a little bit rowdy. Every night. Speak goodly. I probably do speak goodly. I'm not a professional at this. But I don't mind sitting here. Rambling away to everybody. This is basically you're hanging out with me sitting at my back step at my house as I draw cartoons. So, or at work, go to work, ramble about UFOs and aliens and everything. Everyone's like, Dirty Phil, how was the show last night? I'm like, let me tell you. We had some guy on there talking about UFOs and aliens. And
Welcome back to me, Grantavius Max, with his power stash. Anybody wants it, just let me know. I'm selling it. I'm actually going to sell my power stash. I better take that back. That just sounds completely creepy.
if somebody buys your power stash, they also have to buy my book. Because, I mean...
Ooh. Well, if they, you know what? I think we'll have to have a discussion with Dave and say, you know what? If one person buys 2 of your books, then we'll sell my power stash to that person as well. And then I'll just regrow another one. So we're talking about UFOs, yurts, helicopters, and lightning out of blue sky with Rodrigo. We're going to bring him back and get him back into the right position there, my man. You go fill up that juice of yours. I don't know if he's listening.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, I just
there you
refilled
are.
it. Yeah.
Good man. Good man. And Palmer, that is creepy, Grant. Yeah. You know what's even funnier is there's a certain individual, and I've actually told people to go find this person because there's a show where me and Dave were talking, and he says, this guy's like, I want Grant's power stash or whatever. And he's like, you know what? Grant's going to give you his power stash if you show up to Vegas next year. And I was like, Yeah, I'll do that. And he's like, what? He said, yes, I do that. No problem. And I think I figured out a way to be able to keep it like it is. And, it's not acrylic. I forgot what they call that stuff. Epoxy. There we go. To be able to put it in one of those cool epoxy cubes and just have the power stash in the cube. I think I found a way to do it. So, and if I'm right, then I'm going to do that. And you guys will see me naked on screen. It'll be great. All right. So let's get back to the lightning in the sky like a Tesla coil. These, Black Hawk helicopters flying around like nothing's wrong, which is completely mind-boggling. I don't understand why they're not paying attention to this at all. You got a yurt on the other side.
I mean, I think they're paying attention to it. They're just they were. There was other things going on and that would go on that made it very evident that they were there together. And there were things that were evident there that made me think there were both parties there, as opposed to just a special access program that had that kind of technology, if that makes sense. So, so the orbs and all of that stuff is great. The clouds have happened. The cloud sucks itself back in for the first time. And here's where things get interesting. I see the little triangle kind of zipping across the sky again, like I did the first time. And by the way, when that thing's really high up, it's moving so much faster than a commercial airliner at the same speed. It's not, again, it's not shooting star fast, but it's like, it's really traversing the sky, a lot of sky quickly at scale. You're just like, man, that thing's moving. It was almost like it was gliding across the top of the atmosphere. And it's triangular. It was like it felt like looking at a really high-tech hang glider. Gotcha. It was just picking up some kind of speed. Anyway, back to our handy dandy back of my notebook graph. So we've got hills and mountains right up over here. All of a sudden, a cloud of mist, very similar to whatever's happening in the sky. Sky's clear again, by the way. Starts to billow over the mountain and hillside. Not mountains, I should call them hills. They're tall hills, but they're not, they're not the Rockies up there. So starts kind of billowing over the hills and starts to come directly towards us. And it's big, but it's contained. Like it's not like it's permeating the whole sky. It's hiding something. It's like a giant cloud with something inside of it heading directly at us at a relatively slow rate of speed, probably 2 or 3 miles an hour, maybe 5 miles an hour. Very low to the ground. Here I am talking about 100 feet. 100, maybe 120 feet. Low. It was low. There was a giant black triangle in it. There was a giant black triangle in this mist. And as it really got overhead, like directly above my head, like it was low enough in the ground that you could sort of see through the mist. You could start to make things out, but it was still obscured. It wasn't out in the open and on its own, and didn't stop moving. But what it did do is it went through a number of different light sequences. So there was times when it was just this big sort of off-white, eggshell colored sort of light directly in the middle. Sometimes it was the one in the middle and then 3 smaller but equal colored lights on either corner. Sometimes those would be off. Sometimes it would just be the corners with no middle light. Sometimes none of the eggshell lights would be on, and there would be 3 little red lights in each corner, and then also 3 little lights, but it was a red, blue, and a green in each corner. Yeah, and that was kind of, for me, the sort, like, that looked awfully human to me.
Mhm.
You know,
Just because of the colors.
because of the colors, because of the size in relation to the object, like they were placed and positioned in the way that you would imagine would be on a plane. And they weren't the big lights, they were little tiny lights,
Mhm.
you know, that were positioned further into the point of the corner, whereas the bigger ones, you know, obviously have to sit a little lower
Yep.
down from the point. It just seemed very human. Sorry, go ahead.
So real quick, for everybody that's in the Space Divers Club, the clam sets the password every night, and you know when you can use it and use it wisely. And tonight is Payette. It means spangled. Payette. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anytime I see stuff that's enunciated like this with two L's, it's always a Y to me. And but yes, you guys know what to do with it. Use it wisely, my friends. And the clam, welcome to the show once again. Sorry for interrupting. So now we have a triangle. You have the little blue, green, red lights, and then the white lights that are hanging lower.
Yeah, there was one in each corner. So
Gotcha.
the three weren't all in one corner. You know, there would be a red or a white, a green, and a blue one occupying each corner. And then sometimes those bulbs would be totally red. Sometimes they wouldn't be there at all, and it would be the bigger sort of um, like my lamp colored, not the lamp shade, but like the light coming out from under it. It was kind of that color, not a bright white, kind of a yellowy white, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And as it was passing overhead, a couple of different things happened. It would be silent.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of silence going on, but it could also not be silent. And the it didn't sound exactly the same, but the closest thing that I could compare it to is like the hum of a transformer. You know, I don't know if you've ever, like, back in your old neighborhood where you know you'd have like an electrical box somewhere, and like if you'd stand next to it, you could kind of hear it going.
Yep.
Yeah, that hum. There was like an electrical hum, and the air underneath it and surrounding me felt vibratory. It felt charged with something. It felt there, like, I don't know if it was just the sheer immensity of the craft being that close to the top of my head, coming overhead, that, but like you felt the gravitas, or just some, you know, that those, it wasn't the air that I was standing in before that thing was on top of me.
Gotcha.
And everything felt normal. Like there was definitely some kind of, almost like a sense of pressurization to the air as it surrounded me when it was above my head.
Was it warm? Did you feel any warmth with it?
Not in the sense of, not that I like, no, I didn't, not in the sense of like heat coming off of it. Certainly not, you know, like standing next too close to an engine, for instance, nothing like that. The weather that day in upstate New York, even though it was, you know, the 1st of August, can get down to pretty, you know, I want to say it was probably in the 40s, you know, or 50s
Gotcha.
in terms of temperature. It felt like a static electrical charge in the air, you know, or almost a subtle vibration of the air, is the best I can kind of describe it. But it didn't stop over us. It just kept going on its way. But I mean, it made a point to go directly above us. And before this and after it, the orbs were getting closer. They were doing a lot of dancing, and I mean, there were times where, I mean, they were not much higher than the roof of the hunting blind we were sitting on the porch of, zooming by us. And it was about halfway through the night where we knew they were doing something in front of us. They knew we were watching them. They knew we were there. This actually elicited a lot of fear. Like when we start, you know, again, at first, I'm like, is this happening over the whole East Coast? Is this happening over the whole planet? They certainly don't seem to be being coy. They don't care. You know, they're not hiding themselves at all. You know, is this happening everywhere? But no, like during this night, it became very evident that they were trying to get across, like, hey, what's up?
Yep. It's called the wow factor.
The
There.
wow. Well,
Yep.
we were certainly wowed, and I was certainly wowed. There was really sort of two simultaneous climaxes to the night, and it wasn't even the giant triangle, which I thought was definitely the climax up until the other thing happened. But at this point, we're getting pretty scared. I've seen a thing in the air that is the size of a football field. Like it. If this was this giant wheat field, if you drew a triangle from, like that's how big it was. It was
Mhm.
huge, huge. It was a flying fortress of some kind. And it wasn't the pyramidal one. Like I could tell that it was a triangle specifically.
Flat on all sides.
Flat on all sides. I mean, a little bit of thickness, but very like
Yeah.
slice of pizza like.
Gotcha.
The one thing that I noticed was there seemed to be a texture on the structure. Um, I know this is gonna sound crazy. I guess it is crazy. And this is really not that accurate of a comparison. So I don't want you to think, I want you to just imagine something like it.
Okay.
But there was a texture on it. It was like a cross between a black or charcoal stone slate of some kind, like you sometimes see on waterfalls,
Mhm.
in the jungles or something like, but that has some kind of striations on it. I mean, it almost looked like a flying megalith, ancient megalith with big LED lights on it. Or another sort of uh, thought that came to mind was that if you remember the crafts in the original Star Wars, the Millennium Falcon, none of them were smooth. They had
Mhm.
all these pipes and
Yep.
things, dingle dangles, all over the surface but they were small, and on such a big craft, it could make it look pretty flat, in low res, but when you're up close or like one of those big destroys, you're like, oh, there's all kinds of doohickeys, like on the surface of this,
Yeah.
which I thought, I don't know. That was
You ever watch Star Wars or not Star Wars? Star Trek? The Borg ship. I know it's a square, but when you see a Borg ship, it's just a square with a whole bunch of stuff going on there, but it looks square.
man.
Does that
I haven't. I know. I mean, it's been highly recommended to me my entire life, and I've never trekked it up, man. Like I said, like I didn't ask for this. I didn't like
Yeah.
that. That's been the biggest surprise of all. Was especially New York was like, is it my friend? Is it, what's going on here?
Well,
Because they seem to be.
based on the rest of your story, I mean, besides these two incidents, I mean, you basically been followed by these things across the United
Ever
States.
since, yeah, ever since.
So I think it's more of it's not one of your friends, it's you.
No. At this point, no. Yeah, there a lot of lots. These were just the first two instances that have kicked off the last 2 years or almost 2 years of like really regular types of encounters. So I know we're only on a 2-hour show, so I'll try to move it along here. New York ended with the triangle disappeared. The climax of the night was two pronged because they were sort of happening at the same time. I can't actually recall which one was happening first necessarily, but one happened very quickly and one took quite a bit of time. So we knew we were being watched. We knew that the tent people on the other side probably had a pretty good idea. We were sitting on the porch watching all of this. You know, I'm a Latino kid from the hood back in the day. I don't want any problems with the police or the military or anybody, and I'm like, I don't want to get in trouble. But I know that they're on us, and I don't know if they're just trying to wow me or what they're, or if they're going to come and be like, hey, you didn't see that or whatever. But at some point, something starts coming up the road fast, really, really fast. And so if you imagine, let's say this is the hunting blind, and then this is, there's a porch with a little awning on it, and we've been kind of moving around the night to get better glimpses of stuff, but we've been predominantly sitting on this porch, and then there's this horseshoe drive. So I can't really see what's going on behind the house.
Mhm.
Like behind, beyond this sort of angle out, like I can't see anything happening back here unless I walk out from and look. But we're on the porch at this time, and at this point it's probably 4:40 in the morning or something like that. It's towards the end of the night. The sun's going to start coming up pretty soon. Something starts coming up the road really, really fast, and we can, and the noise thing is weird because it wasn't the craft making noise, it was everything around it making noise. I don't know if you can imagine, if you're not looking at anything, but you're standing next to a road on an autumn day and you hear a relatively quiet car, so you're not getting the engine noise, but just the whoosh going down the road and the leaf, almost like a white noise type of thing, but it's a gravel road. So I'm like, it legitimately sounded like somebody was just hauling ass up the road. And all of a sudden we see light emanating from presumably, and this is all happening so fast. Like it all happened in a split second, but it basically looked like we were being rolled up on and they were coming up the horseshoe drive. And I'm like, they're here, they're gonna arrest me, whatever, kill me for having seen too much. I don't know, so that was the initial thought, but that's not what happened. One of the orbs had come down to ground level and whooshed down the road. So how do I do this? Let me do it this way. Okay. So we're here down the road, and in the military tents over here, it came down to ground level and just at over 100 miles an hour, but not light speed, rushed down the street or down the dirt road and like went and parked itself at the tent. And I got a really good look at this orb. Like everything's mostly been in the sky, but I was 20 feet from this thing. I was 25, 30 feet tops from at eye level with this thing as it whizzed down the road and the trees just warped around it.
Mm-hmm.
And you could almost hear the wood of the trees groaning, but they were retaining their whatever that thing wasn't actually like physically interacting with our environment, and hence hence the no sonic booms, hence the no engine noise, hence the no need to slow down in space or water or whatever. Like this thing was found a way to travel in the space between atoms and could make that space bigger so it could fit through it without disturbing the thing that it's moving through, aka ghosts or whatever. That idea, moving through a wall. What are you really doing there? You're just moving, but in the space between.
Dimensionals.
Yeah. So I got to see this thing. For the longest time, I've talked about it as like an energy donut, but I now know, well, first of all, it looks exactly like the biblical definition of an angel. I think I sent you that picture, these wrapping rings of light and energy with a black thing in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But it also had it looks like a toroidal energy field that's spinning around itself, so there's some kind of darker nucleus, and then it's sort of, it looks very extra dimensional. It looks like a 4D object kind of, folding in on itself and expanding over itself, and in this very high motion pattern. But
there's a name for that. In fact, there was a movie that they had dropped this gal who went to go to see her father and stuff. I'm sure everybody in the chats is going to blow me up on saying what movie it is, but that's what they had in there. It was the concentric rings that were spinning super fast around each other. And there's a name for those. I just, off the top of my head, I can't figure it out. So anybody in the chat just wants to tell me what that is, please let me know. But yes, I understand completely. I'm actually trying to look for the picture real quick for you to pop it up, but keep going.
Yeah, so it whizzed by. The person I was with initially and I both had front and center view of it. The person that we had invited, this was so frightening that in that split second of all of that commotion happening, she turned around completely and went full fetal position, you know, freak out, and heard it all, heard it whiz by, you know, but didn't actually see the orb. My other friend, she saw it. Like, I remember watching the orb whiz by, and she was kind of right in front of me and off to my left, you know, and so I'm looking at the back of her head as she turns around just to slack jaw aside at what we just saw. And the thing was about 25 to 30 feet in diameter. I mean, it if it was touching the trees, it wouldn't have fit, you know, but because it can kind of, it would have been too wide for the road it was on, but because it can kind of be wherever, it just, I mean, it was like, if to leave any doubt, to kind of cap off the night, it was just like one flyby at eye level, just a couple of feet away, went straight over to that tent, went straight over to the glowing light that was emanating from the other side of the tree line, parked itself. Um, Now, as this was happening, or right after this was happening, something super scary happened. um, Something came out of the woods and was walking directly at us in the wheat field towards us, like directly at us. And I could not, I tried so hard to figure out what I was looking at. I couldn't tell if it was a bear at first or maybe a buck,
Oh,
you
gosh.
know, and it was, at first it was walking out to the side. It was walking slow, but whatever it was much bigger than me. And it was at the other end of the field, so small, and it would take upwards of 10 minutes maybe for it to like really make its way through the field. Um, and I swear at some point I saw antlers, and at some points I didn't, but towards the end of this thing made it about halfway up the field and then stands up even taller. Yeah. Yeah.
Like on
And
hind
gets
legs.
thinner. Yeah. Yeah. And it was on hind legs. Uh, but it was at this point that I really felt surest that it wasn't a bear because of everything going on up top. But, you know, I don't know. I couldn't call it anything else except for maybe some kind of shadow figure of some kind. But it straight up walked across the field, made a right angle turn, and started walking dead towards us until it was maybe about 40 or 50 yards away. Still can't really make out what it was. And then it went back into the ground as if it, you know, as if it almost fell through a hole. And then that was it. And then once again, and you know, as dawn is rolling up, I can hear the vans and hear, you know, the vehicular activity. And this time, or the vehicles that I see whizzing down the road, they look like salvage trucks. They're salvage trucks with campers on them, loaded up with equipment, and they all look to be driven by badasses, you know, like Navy SEAL types. And I'm like, this is interesting. So that was New York. That was the first, you know, those were the first two big instances that completely changed everything, sent me down the rabbit hole. And then yeah, I went, you know, for the last 2 years, I spent a good chunk amount of time traveling all over the country, in both remote and busy places, moving to Oklahoma City, and you know, everything has just sort of continued.
Wow. I mean, just wow. Yeah, I got a question for you. You go from literally all the way from New York down to Los Angeles, from east to west. Then you go from, you know, north Canada border down to the Mexican border. And these things are always showing themselves. Is it always the exact same light patterns that you're seeing?
So those 2 nights were really unique in and of themselves.
Yep.
So I haven't seen the big giant triangle since. I've seen the smaller black fast triangle. I am so sorry to do this. Can I run to the restroom really fast? I'm going to be so fast. I'm going to be so fast. You guys wouldn't believe it.
No problem, my man. You take your
Thank
you
you.
take your time. I'll say hi to people in the chat. Oh my goodness. So this guy, it's wild some of the stuff he's gone through. And the fact that he's been seeing all this all across the United States. Now, I think the biggest one of them all is going to be the being that he met. And so when he comes back, and by the way, this is supposed to be the fastest break he's ever taken. But when he comes back, we're going to ask him about this being. So I'll say hi to a few people in here. And Enzo, you are right. This is an amazing story. And I've talked with him about this for quite a while. Lakota Colbert, good seeing you in the chats, my man. Love you, brother. Let's see who else we got here. JKGN. Dave did not quit. He is just on it's kind of a business trip, more or less. We're calling it a vacation, but he went to the MUFON Symposium and he had to talk there. And now he's meeting up with some other people in Vegas real quick that are going to be with the show. So enough about that. Let's get Rodrigo back in here and into the correct spot. Listen, my man.
Sorry
You
about
haven't.
that, by the way.
Oh,
Thank you.
you are a-okay. Things happen.
It's the
So,
tea.
yep. And so here's the deal. You've seen the UFOs or the triangles, the big, the small. You've seen the orbs. You've been watching them across the United States. But what about this light being? Tell me about this light being.
Yes, I will. I'll segue into that quickly. So since those two big nights with the big events with the the predominantly what was going on as I was traveling around the United States was specifically a bluish orb and a reddish orange orb, usually together, and usually doing different things. And in I had a hunch, kind of all from Jersey on, that they were tapped into whatever was happening in here, and so I imagined there might be a two-way thing going on. Um, but it was in Colorado with a different friend uh, that I really had like my first like um, interaction, like communicative interaction, where it's like, oh, we're talking to each other, we are engaging with one another. You are here because I'm here, and and it was interesting because you would, or at least for me, I would almost end up talking to it like a child or maybe a puppy, and just try to put it at ease that if it wanted to come closer or to come say hi, that it was okay. And I would ask it questions. Do you want us to come closer to you? If so, move. If not, don't. And it would bounce, kind of fairy like. So that was typically what I would see. I also would see the orbs popping out of something basically invisible, but maybe not quite. Once again, you could almost see the distortion that it was creating around itself, but it was still obscured. And then it would just be spitting out orbs, really high up in the sky. And then 5 minutes later, super low altitude jets would whiz by, in the middle of nowhere in Montana. And yeah, man, I was totally monitored in that way until I made it back to Austin. Had the whole drone thing happen, was followed by people. But yeah, a couple of days ago, I guess it was June 30th, I saw what I can only describe as, I guess, a light being. It was super random. My ex was over to say hello. We're friends, and interestingly, it happened to be the 3-year anniversary that we met, which was interesting. You know, I guess random. But we were on my back porch having a conversation. And I noticed that along our back fence, this is actually a perfect representation of my backyard as well. Exact same shape, guys. You'll never believe it. So this is my backyard. Here's my house, and I've got this back porch, that takes up a good chunk of it. And then it's this big long run that's about 150 feet long. It's a good sized yard run kind of thing. Well, right where my finger is along the back fence posts, I would say about a human's width, about 3.5 fence posts, and about a fence post's height was this light, but it was really, really peculiar. So that I stared at this for a while because initially I assumed maybe it was my next door neighbor's headlights that were bleeding through the fence. Along that back fence, there are neighbors. And so when they come in to park, like I can see their headlights coming through and then they park. And even when their lights are on. But actually, because I studied this after the fact, when those neighbors are sort of elevated. So when they come in and park, their headlights and lights are actually above the fence line, not through it.
Right.
There's also a massive tree right here that obscures anything this way coming in. My house is here obscuring anything coming from here. And then I've got my neighbor's house, a shed, and a giant oak tree. And then I've got a giant pole right in the middle of our yard separating my neighbor and my yard. There's no fence between us. It's just a big open space. And this is lit, and it lights up the whole open center of the yard. And once again, same color, basically the color of the light that's coming out of the inside of the lampshade, not the lampshade itself, but right underneath it. Same kind of color, maybe more gold, honestly, than that. And it looked like a couple of things to me. I couldn't tell, and really, if I'm honest with myself, my opinion is that it was kind of just standing there fluctuating. But what I think was happening was I was seeing the being standing in the fence.
Okay.
Like the fence posts themselves were glowing. The lights between the cracks in the fence were glowing, but it wasn't from light coming behind it. It wasn't from light hitting the fence from in front of it, because me being right in front of the light, I would see wherever that light source could have come from, and there wasn't any. And so all of this has happened in a matter of a couple of seconds, and we're just having a conversation, and I keep looking at this light that's just there, taking up a few fence posts of my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, I go, "What's that?" And she turns around and she goes, and then she starts looking around for where the light source might be coming from. And then it shifts a little bit, the light move, it looks like the light it's not perfectly still. It's not perfectly still. There is movement happening, but it is staying in the same spot at first. And it's at this point that I can that I'm getting the sensation that it's both behind the fence, in the fence, and in front of the fence. And it's the fence posts that are lighting up that is allowing me to perceive whatever I'm seeing, is sort of the feeling that I was getting. And so at this point, I'm 2 years in, baby. I'm like, cool, I'm going to just start walking towards it. and see what happens. And this is one of the telltale things about the thing. We could call it a phenomenon. I'll just call it the thing. But I often catch it as it's bouncing. So like, yeah, like you very much get the sense that it's been sitting there for who knows how long, and you're only seeing it when it's firing up the engine and taking off for the day.
Gotcha.
And so anyway, that's just generally speaking. I start walking towards this thing. Ex-girlfriend stays on the porch. I start walking towards this thing. I get about just before halfway down the run, the light starts to kind of do this. Like, it's honestly like there wasn't a figure shape to it necessarily, but the way that it moved was so human in a way. Like, like if you think you're invisible and playing hide and seek, and somebody starts walking right at you, and you start to like, has he found me? Do I need to leave right now? Like I saw this hesitation in the way the light, and then the light just moved along the fence until it got to the edge of the fence and disappeared.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I was like, well, that one was new. I haven't seen that before. That was different. And then a few days later, it happened again, but it didn't even let me get into the yard. The minute it saw that I saw it, it was like, peace.
Yep. You made him nervous.
But yeah, that was I hadn't seen the light guy before. That was a new one, for sure.
That is insane. I mean, I've heard stories like this before. I mean, there's plenty of people that see this. I'm sure now we've talked before, especially before you were on the show, and you're going down the rabbit hole pretty quickly. I mean, obviously these things are taking you with them down that rabbit hole. They're kind of guiding you, it seems like. And the fact that they're now making their presence even more known, there's probably more to come. And if there is,
well, and the people
them
following me was crazy. Like I was like, I'm on, for whatever reason, I'm on somebody's radar, both in the human domain and whatever else is going on. And it's totally, it's completely made day-to-day life rather difficult. You can't, it's completely derailed. It's derailed a lot of things. I mean, how can it not? And when you see this at the scale that it is, when we're talking about daily encounters with the Navy, when we're talking about government disclosure and congressional hearings, when we're talking about, when everybody's starting to now feel like they're making the connection that, hey, all these names for the weird stuff, might not all be, in New York, I'm not a religious person. I've studied religious things, but the overwhelming feeling in New York was not little green men from Mars. It was, oh my God, this is the Bible. This is the Torah. This is Hinduism. This is Buddhism. This is the cave art. This is when you see it in person and you look at all of the interpretations, it's a no-brainer how they got to these analogies and metaphors that they came up with. Like and so all of that, together, the state of the world, historically speaking, these guys are never showing up to be like, you guys are doing a great job, keep it up. Like they show up right before we, take ourselves out, and, typically they aid or allow us to take our, so the whole impact of what's been going on has been super heavy as to the implications of like, what does this mean for the next 5 years? What world are we going to be living in the next 10? what do we need to be prepared for? You know, a lot of people ask the question, you know, does our government know? And I'll tell you right now, I don't know if it was special access program and other, you know, another private agency type stuff or proper military stuff, but our humans in a technical capacity are doing something in conjunction with these other whatevers. And the government probably does have plausible deniability, but what I can say is like somebody does know, and somebody like, you know, this idea that everybody is stupid here and has no idea what's going on is based on what I've seen, probably not the case, you know, and having seen all the things that I did, and then having, you know, been basically tailed for 3 or 4 months and potentially still to this day, but it's not something that I'm actively like aware of. Down to not being, you know, my internet and cell service conveniently going down when I'm trying to send something very specific that corroborates what I'm saying to an individual, like weird stuff, clicking sounds on the phone. The implantation experience was weird. I got frozen for a split second while wide awake. And then the next morning, I was walking around with a pain in my foot and a pain in my hand. And there's these lumps there, and now they're still there months and months later. And that kind of marked the first time all these things stopped, which was in the fall of last year. And yeah, since Memorial Day, it's been right back up in terms of frequency, stuff in the sky, orbs. One of the cool ones that I saw that was another one-off. Hopefully I can find this picture quickly. It looked like a fire rock.
Oh wow, yeah. So
that was flying across the sky and kind of doing, it's like it takes different shapes as you see it from different angles, but when it glints in the sun, it looks like it's on fire. It's really cool.
yep. So there's Warren Hardcastle asked, does Rodrigo feel threatened?
That's a great question. I have at times. When I was in Austin and the drone thing was going on, and it was very evident that I was being tailed by some kind of organization. Yeah, I was very afraid. Mostly because I don't have, I've had a pretty rough go of it, and so I don't have many resources. I don't have health insurance. I don't have a way to really defend myself against, you know, any kind of entity with any kind of level of organization that would want to do me harm. Um, and it just was so curious to me why this was happening in the first place. Like I said, nobody's ever spent a whole lot of money on me or gone through this, this much trouble for me. Mind speak, yes. So the telepathy
So
incidents.
real quick, that's Brown Dwarf, and he's asking if Rodrigo experienced mind speak with the activity for any of those that can't see the show.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking that, because it was definitely one of the couple of things I'm going to forget to bring up. So last summer, this actually preceded, so it was late summer, preceded the implantation experience. Once again, I'm on the back porch with my then girlfriend at the time, and where we're both positioned on, never fails. So here's my house. The rest of the backyard is, or actually, this is a more accurate shape of the porch. So the house is here. She's sitting here. I'm sitting here. The backyard goes out this way, and then our neighbor's house goes to about right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so from where she's sitting, she can't see around the neighbor's house. Where I'm sitting, I can see across the neighbor's house and into his neighbor's yard. So we have two different vantage points at this point. So I'm sitting there, and I just happened to look over there, and an orb lights up. And what was cool about this orb was that it looked, well, it was the same kind of orb, but it was such a different size than the ones that I'm used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm used to seeing these things that are the size of a shed, or that could certainly fit somebody in it, not one that's the size of a softball, for example. And that's what happened here. This thing started out, it was like it was always there and was just turning on, and it turned on. It was about the size of a baseball, and then so it turns on. It's about the size of a baseball. Then it like powers up and gets to be about the size of a softball, maybe a small dodgeball, and then it starts hurling itself like from my neighbor's yard right at me.
Oh man.
It's at 20 feet, 25 feet in the air. It's not high, but it is higher than I am tall. And so at the minute it rounds the corner of the neighbor's house, now my then girlfriend can see it. And so now we're both like, as this thing is whizzing by us, and it did this sort of curve, it's kind of like a swoop to just for a dramatic effect, and then it went up and around behind the tree that would otherwise have obscured any kind of light being there for the light being. But that's the tree that it like flew around as it passed us, and it disappeared. What was crazy was in that moment, we're both in shock. We rearrange ourselves on the porch. So now I'm facing the backyard instead of the back of my house, and now she's facing the back of my house. And I'm having this internal moment based on what I just saw, because one of the, I guess we won't get around to this, but a 1.5-year-old described this same orb type figure on my grandmother's deathbed in front of our whole family, and spoke like a full-on adult for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then went back to being a baby to tell us this whole, yeah. But when that thing flew by, I was like, oh my God, that is what she was describing as a baby, speaking like an adult for a couple of minutes, that was in the room with my grandmother in the hospital. That's a whole story.
Yep.
But it was small. Anyway, it went away. We switched spots. We're talking about it, but I'm putting all of these things in my head together now that I know that the sizes of these orbs are totally fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I say something in my head, and I visibly see my then girlfriend flip out. And as she's flipping out, I hear her flipping out in my head.
Oh gosh.
Before she says anything. And then I start to flip out from hearing her in my head before she's hearing me, and I'm flipping out internally. And it was chaos, and it only lasted a few seconds, but it was complete and total chaos. But we were telepathic there for a couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute we were like, okay, let's, the minute we intentionally tried to see if we could get it to continue, it didn't.
Gotcha.
But that was so freaky. It felt like she was sitting in my brain, and that, and I could tell that by her reaction that I was sitting in hers, and, and communicating verbally was totally superfluous. We were literally just repeating ourselves in our heads, and then out loud, and then in our heads, and then out loud. It was a mess, but the whole thing was, it was mind-blowing. I mean, it was just completely, and I don't remember if it was that night or a couple of nights later or whatever, but it was relatively shortly after that, when I feel like I maybe got implanted. And again, it didn't, that notion of implants and stuff, like I've been having to like work my way into the woo from, and so I initially this was mostly nuts and bolts, and is there a spiritual connection, you know, and now it's sort of evolved from there. But yeah,
Wow.
it's been
So,
wild couple of years.
so what are you doing now? I mean, are you still into acting? Or what are you doing now in life?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't have any immediate plans to. I mean, candidly, dude, since I've not bounced back since the pandemic, and this happened just a couple of months in, started to happen just a few months into it, and I'm not up to a whole lot. I'm just trying to keep it together, trying to get my feet on the ground again in my own way, and try to like work my way back into living day-to-day normal life, with this deep knowing that the reality I know is probably going to change dramatically in the pretty near future, and probably some not so great ways, and just kind of trying to move on, knowing with all of that, to move on, seeing everybody else focused on, shit that may not matter in a couple months, or stuff that may not matter in a couple months,
Yep.
So,
To wrap things up, because we only have about 3 minutes left on the show, everybody, Rodrigo we could probably go if we let him tell his whole story, because this goes back to childhood. And unfortunately, we only have 2 hours tonight to let him have another moment on SOR. I'm going to have you on again. And Paranormal Pixie says he belongs on SOR with us. And you know what? I kind of agree. I agree with that. And I really do. So for everybody out in the chats, thank you so much for being here. Bones, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it so much. It helps us keep the lights on, so to speak, here at Spaced Out Radio. If you guys want to find any of our swag or see any of Filthy's drawings, go out to spacedoutradio.com. You can Google it, check it out. I even got a shirt on there, and you can get the Moo Woo shirt if it's still available. I'm still waiting for mine to come in. But really, bro, I got to tell you, we got to have you on again. Whether I can get you on after hours, I don't care what it's got to be, but we got.
Yeah, I'm here for it. There's a lot to cover still, for sure.
Oh, even in 2 hours, I know I kind of paced you through it a little faster than you wanted, or were able to make it a cohesive, but it's so detailed. You have so much that has gone on. So what we'll do is we're going to try to find time to bring you back. That way we can help finish this story, because it's an amazing story, like Enzo said in the beginning. For everybody else,
and by the way, for what it's worth, you got me on here. When I first reached out to you, you were like, "Talk about it," and I was like, I don't know, man. But the reality is, frankly, when this first thing happened, I was telling people, I was like, "We're not gonna make it till Christmas, guys," based on what I just said. It was at such a big scale, and obviously, it's been the dissemination of information has been so slow. But we're close to something, big, and what's the point if I just wait and everything happens and I wag my finger and say, I knew it, it's that's pretty worthless. So I guess because all of this stuff is happening, it is happening to me. Before this stuff gets really weird, I might as well talk about it and see how it helps people.
Well, I really appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm going to try to help you as much as I can to further your story along. For everybody else in the chats and anybody that's listening that can't see it, whether you're listening to it as a podcast or as a broadcast. Thank you so much for being here. Rodrigo, thank you, my man. Dirty Filth, we love you. Thank you for doing your drawings. For everybody else out there, keep it strange, keep it weird, and keep looking to the skies. Have a good night.
Stay healthy, my friend.
You too.
You need bail money, give me a call.
Always, Dad. Take care.
You too.